Alright, so here is our first animal project that we're going to be doing. And what we have here is this snake. I expertly modeled him. Very difficult to do. He's going to be called the stake startup file. So as before, project window, new folder, Sarcona underscore snake. Make sure it's in the 2540 folder, work. Hit accept, and then copy the snake startup folder into your scenes folder. Okay, I already have it there, so I don't need to move it anywhere. Alright, so with this specific item, it's like, okay, we want to animate him, and we want to animate him like a snake would typically move, which is kind of like a wiggly pattern, is what his geometry could do. Now I could come in here, just so you can see, and grab vertices and, you know, rotate them, but I'm not going to get the results that I would need. Okay, and it's not really going to be consistent or easy to do something like that. Now we have shown before going into the create deformers nonlinear and doing something like a wave. And if I take my amplitude up a little bit and then I adjust my offset, you see how I can get this kind of wavy pattern. But it doesn't really give me the ability to control him moving, and you can see that he really doesn't, you know, his face is like squishing as well as his eye, and that doesn't look natural. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to create a method that we can animate this guy much more intuitively. So we're gonna start with these joints here. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the skeleton joint tool. I'm gonna go to my top view, make sure my grid is turned on, and I'm just gonna start at his tail. Okay, and I want to make sure this is snapped. So I'm going to hold down X and click here, right past his tail. So I'm still holding X, and this is going to be, you know, a couple minutes to do this. But I'm going to go through and just click on every single one of these grid markers that's right here. So you see where the grid line's coming in. So I'm just holding X and making sure that I don't accidentally click two on top of each other like this. You see how this little triangle is now pointing up? That's a bad thing. So I hit backspace, hold down X, and continue along. Now if I go too far, I can again hit backspace, hold down X, and continue on. Okay, I don't want to have to come back to do this later. I want to be doing this right now. So I'm being very careful that I get this lined up correctly. Okay, closer to the head. I want to make sure that I don't go too close to the head with this. So I'm just kind of giving myself a little bit of room. Just holding X and clicking on each one of these grid markers. Okay, so now I'm getting close to the head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's say about there. Right about before this line here, and then I'm going to put X again, and then I'm going to hold down X again, and I'm going to click past his head. Okay, because if we're looking at how this guy would be constructed, all down here we have individual spine, individual joints going and moving and wiggling, but his head is like one big skull area, so there's not going to be a whole lot of deformation there. Behind the skull, definitely lots of deformation. Front of the skull, not so much. Now, we're not animating his mouth opening and closing. He doesn't even have that kind of setup built in. If I were to grab some of these points and pull them, you can see that he really doesn't even have a mouth. Okay, so this is meant to be just a static movement. The other thing we're going to do is take care of his eyes too. Like, how do we get these things to animate a bit easier? Alright, so first part's done. We created a bunch of joints down the length of our snake. The next thing we need to do is I'm going to go to my create CV curve tool. I'm going to jump to the top view, and I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to draw the path I want my little snake buddy to walk along, or to crawl, or whatever you want to call it. There we go. So we'll just pretend he's starting here. He's zipping along, da-dee-da, and then he winds up back over here. Okay, so that's the path of my snake friend. I can adjust this afterwards also, so I'm not locked to it, but I just need to create something to start off on, right? So now that I have that, what I need to do is I need to take these eyes and I need to Shift P to pull them out of that group. Okay, before they were inside the snake group, so I click the eyes and Shift P, pull them out of the group. Okay, because my next step is one that I need to have the eyes out of there. Okay, so now I created joints, but again, they're not going to do anything until I connect them. So I'm going to grab the root, which is this guy. I'm going to verify that it's in the center of the snake. Okay, if I come to my front view, it looks like it's actually a little bit low. And if we go to the very back of the snake, we can definitely see that it is low. So I'm just going to pull it up to about the middle. Alright, that looks good. Maybe this one, I'll just scoot down like that. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to grab this joint here, shift click the snake, go to Skin, Bind Skin, Smooth Bind option box, and let me reset this. Alright, the default should be good. And create or bind. Alright, so now that I bound him, he turns pink. And if I grab some of my joints and I rotate them, you'll see that now he's moving. And that's what we want. Okay. Now again, this is way too many joints for us to even consider animating this thing by hand. Alright. It's still like, you know, I can grab a bunch of joints and rotate it and I'll get some nice movement. But it's not what I want to do. That's not the goal of this assignment. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the joints and I'm going to grab the curve. I'm going to connect them so that the joints attach to the curve. So under Skeleton, IK Spline Handle Tool, I'm going to turn off Auto Create Curve. That's why we created this curve here, because we don't want to use our auto created one, because it's very limiting. Okay. This is all fine here. So I just click that one button off, and then down here in the help area, it'll say use left mouse button to click the start joint. That's going to be this one by his tail, so I just marquee it. And then it'll say select the end joint, and that's going to be the one right before this joint, right before the neck one. Okay, so I just click on it. Now it says use the left mouse button to select the curve. There's the curve. Okay. Now you'll notice that his eyes did not move with us. Okay, now I did that on purpose just so you can see that we have to do a little bit more work before we do that. So I'm going to hit undo, go back to the move tool, and then I'm going to parent his eyes in. So I'm grabbing both of his eyes. I want to parent it to this guy here, okay, to his head joint. So I click both eyes, shift click that, and hit P to parent it. So now as I grab the head joint and I move it around, you'll see that the eyes are moving with it. Now they actually, if I move this up too far, you'll see that his eyes start to pop out of his head. Okay, so this is stuff that we have to kind of work on before we connect it to that thing. We don't have to, but it's definitely going to help us. Okay, so what's happening is as we stretch this up, there's some point back here that's kind of affecting these points there, and causing it to do that. So if I go back, let's say, to the one before it, and I rotate that one up, still doing the same thing. And go up one more. It's not doing as much. Go up one more. Alright, it looks like it's better there. Okay, so you can see that one of these other joints here is affecting it, and that's why it's like not moving all the way. So with a smooth skin, what I can do is I can edit the points and how the joints are affecting them. So under Skin, Edit Smooth Skin, there's a Paint Skin Weights tool. So I just have to make sure the skin is selected. Paint Skin Weights tool, option box. And it should be the last joint that's inside this list. So let me just make this really long, like this. And joint 92, or the very tip one. Either one of these won't matter. It's the same, basically the same thing. Okay. So now as I click through these, you can see I'm going to scroll down to display and turn the wireframe off just so you can see it better. There we go. You can see there's little bits of gray in here. Hopefully you can see that, but there is. Okay. There we go. I can even use this color ramp just to kind of, see the coloring a little bit more. But it is there. We're getting some bits of green and stuff popped in here where it's not perfectly blue. Okay. Even here, when I go to joint 92, you can see that I don't have it all the way up to this red color. It's actually like an orange color. Okay, and what that means is that other joints are affecting it. So what I need to do is I need to go to one of these other ones. I'm just going to go to the very end one here, which is joint 93. Can't see it, but it's there. And I'm going to go to this. I'm going to say skin weight type is skin weight. That's what I want. The normalize, I'm going to say do it interactively. Yes. And I'm just going to paint with a 1 and a 1. Opacity 1, value 1. And I'm just painting this, and you'll see how it's turning red. I can hold B, make this bigger. And eventually what I want this to do is to take over all the weighting for all these points. Okay, so I'm basically saying, okay, this is the skull area. This stuff is all going to move together. So I don't want any transition here like we have on the rest of the body. I want this to be more of a way for it to just kind of stay as one solid shape. That's what I'm doing. Okay, right there I can have some transition. I'm going to turn that color weighting off. I actually don't care for the color weighting. I prefer to look at it in this white coloring, but sometimes you have to look at it that way. Okay, and I can even go inside here if I need to and see if there's any extra points that maybe I missed. Looks like there's a couple in the lip area. And I want all these to be just be pure white. The white means that they're going to move 100% with that joint. There we go. Okay. So now we can try this and see. So I'm going to go back to the joint before it just to see. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to just hit W to get out of that. And I'm going to grab that neck joint again. And I'm going to rotate it. And now we should see that the eyes don't pop out of there. Okay, you can see where the eye is intersecting here as I bring it up. It's intersecting the exact same spot. Okay, so that's good. So that means it's not affecting it in a negative way. Now I'm also going to go up to the joint above it and just test that one out too. Okay, this one's not going to move, this drastically, but I just want to see, make sure it's still looking good. All right, that's good too. Good. Okay, so that's good. We have the head moving as a skull area. We have these eyes here. I need to create something that I can move the eyes with. Okay, and now there's different ways that I could do that. I think what I want to do is to create some arrows. So I can go to create text. And if I go in here and go to my font, that little arrow here, as I use these symbols and scroll down here, eventually one of these will be symbols. It's probably going to be the one called Wingdings or something like that. There we go. I have one called Zombie Holocaust as well. And there's symbol as well. I guess symbol isn't any symbols. Okay. So these Wingding ones, one of them, this one here, had arrows. So here's some arrows. So I believe this is capital A, lowercase a, capital B, lowercase b. Okay. C and then D. So this D is the one I want. So I'm just going to go to Wingdings 3, hit OK. I'm just going to type D, capital D, and create. And if I zoom in here, oops, let me go to my outliner and click my text and hit F. Move it up. There it is. Alright, so I have a couple arrows. Okay, and I just need one of these for right now, and I can just duplicate it. So this here is going to be what his eye is going to look at. Okay, so I'm just going to select the curve. I'm going to delete the history. I'm going to center pivot it. I'm going to put the eye next to it over here. So I'm going to just hold down the V key and middle mouse button, drag it right to that pupil. Okay, so I'm in the move tool, hold down V, and just snap it right to that pupil. Okay, now to be careful I don't snap it to a joint or one of the other points. Okay, so I'm kind of isolating it. Then I'm just going to pull it out. I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees so it's facing the correct way. And then I'm just going to freeze my transforms. Okay, so now it's frozen. I'm probably going to have to freeze it again. I'm going to take this, shift click my skull, and hit P to parent it. Okay, because I want this to be parented to that skull. Okay, so that when the skull moves, you'll see that that little arrow moves also. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate it also. I'm going to flip it over the axis here. Let me snap it to about there. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 away from the eye, 4 away from the eye. Okay, and I'm keeping them even. All right, so these things are perfectly lined up. If I went to my front view and looked at it in the wireframe, I would not see any difference. One of these arrows is not like down here and the other one's there. Okay, perfectly lined up. That's what we want. Perfectly offset. That's also what we want. I'm going to freeze transform again. There we go. I'm going to label this one, and I always label this with, you know, what eye it is, and we always go with the character. So this is left eye control, and this guy here is the right eye control. There we go. And I'm also going to create a circle. And I'm going to take the circle and put it, let's say we put it at the neck here. There we go. Okay. So what we can use a circle for is, instead of having to grab this joint and rotate the joint, what I want to do is grab the circle and be able to rotate the circle to rotate that joint. Okay. I can also use this circle to control where these are, where these arrows are here. Okay, so let's see where this gets us. All right, so I'm going to take this arrow here, shift click the eye, and go to constrain, aim. Okay, now what this is going to do is going to aim this eye at this arrow. Okay, so when I click this eye here, you can see how the move tool is kind of funky. Because he's parented and because he has all this other stuff going on, he's like that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I click the arrow, shift click the eye, and I'm just going to say aim vector is going to be Y, and the up vector is going to be X. So I just change this aim vector to 1 here, and I change the up vector to 1 here. Okay, so we'll hit apply and we'll just see what happens, or add and see what happens. Okay, so now that I hit add, you'll see that now this arrow is what's controlling the eye. And if I hit 6, you can see that we still see the pupil, which is good. Okay, let's do the same thing on this side. Grab this, shift click that, constrain aim. I make sure that 1 is in the Y direction for aim, and 1 is in the X direction for up. Hit apply. Now if I hit 6 here, same thing, good. Okay, so I can take these guys and scoot them forward, scoot them back, and the eyes will follow. Okay, now I don't want to have to grab both of these at the same time to scoot them forward or to scoot them back. Okay, but I guess that's a good benefit because, I don't know, snakes' eyes can move independently, but I would imagine they could. And even if they couldn't, you never really see both eyes unless you're like dead on. Oops. Okay. Alright, so that looks good there. And I think what I want to do is create maybe another circle. And I'm going to snap it to that by holding V, to that joint. This will just be a smaller circle right there. Okay, and this will be for the eyes. I'll even shrink it down so it looks more like it's connected to those circles there. Oops, I see I wasn't snapped perfectly on that joint. I'm kind of like off center. So if I just reset my Z, that should be good. And pull this down some. There we go, that's good. All right, so I'm gonna take this and parent it to that joint here. So I grab the circle, shift click the joint, hit P to parent it. I freeze my transforms, there we go. And then I'm just going to click each one of these arrows, shift click the big circle, and P to parent that. Okay, so now I have this. I can move both of them together. All right, both moving. And then I have these, which I can individually manipulate as well. Okay, so very cool. And if I grab this and rotate it, you'll see how everything moves together and in sync. So we're good there. But again, I want to use this to control that. Okay, so I'm going to take this guy, and he has to be parented to something, because otherwise when the snake moves, he's not going to move. So I'm going to parent him to the joint above it. So I grab this, I shift click the joint above, and I hit P to parent. Okay, so now he's connected to this, so that when I move this joint, that will move. So now I need to take him and freeze his transform. You always freeze the transform after you're done parenting it, and this will be neck control. Okay, now I can't take this joint and parent it to that because it would actually break. If I zoom in here, it broke the connection. It's not really updating it, but it did break the connection there. Okay, so I'm going to use something else. I'm going to click on this circle. I'm going to shift click that. I'm going to go to constrain, and I'm going to use orient. Okay, or I could use parent and turn off translate. Okay, this is the same exact thing as going constrain orient or constrain parent and turning off translate. Maintain offset is fine. Add. Okay, so now I have this. Right, you can see I can just grab that circle and move this around or that around. Okay, and we'll add some more controls to that as well. All right, cool. All right, so now that we have his head rigged, now we can attach it to this curve. Okay, but we have to do all this here before we move it over. Otherwise, it'd be a big pain trying to get these arrows set up. It'd be a big pain trying to get these circles set up in the right spot. So now he's nice and neat. Let me just save as just in case. Let's call this snake. Head rigged. Okay, cool. So now we can go to skeleton. Now we can go to IK spline. Now we can grab that little tail joint, come all the way up here, click the joint, not the big one right at the neck. I'm going to click the one before it, and then click on the circle or the path here. And now you see, if I go to the move tool and move around, turn that off, that now he's on this path. And you see how he's kind of, you know, conforming to the path. Now how do we get him to move on the path? Okay, I can grab the path and I can move it. And you can see that he's going along with it. But here's the cool part is that this IK spline that got created, let's go in the outliner. Okay, so we have this text here. This is nothing. We can delete that. We have this curve, which I'm going to rename to be snake path. Then we have this IK handle, snake control. Let's call it IK spline. Snake IK spline. Okay, that's what we need. The snake IK spline. If we scroll down, there's an offset. So I click on the word offset, and then I middle drag out here. You'll see that the snake is now moving along our path. And you'll see how he gets here and kind of wraps himself up, and he even extends like past that point there. Okay, so now I want to be able to control that. Now I don't want to have to go into the outliner to grab that control and then do that. That's kind of like a waste. And you'll also see that these settings all still work. I grab this, this thing here, I can still move this to control where the eyes are moving. I can grab the arrows individually and control each individual eye as well. Okay, so my next thing I need to do is I need to take this IK spline that's kind of hanging out here and add it to one of these controls. Okay, so right now I don't even have a control for this. I need to add a control. So I'm going to go to Modify, Add Attribute, and my first one that I'm going to do is just some underscores. Okay, just, I don't know, a couple underscores here, and hit Add. So now I have this underscore here at 0, that's fine. And then we'll call this Snake Offset. That's our new one. Now I'm doing lowercase first word, and then the first letter of the second word and every word after that is going to be capitalized. So Snake Offset. And it's going to be a float, and this is going to be 0 to let's say 30. Okay, that'll give us plenty of room to kind of play with. 0 to 30, the default's 0. Hit OK. So now what that does, creates a little attribute for us. Okay, it doesn't do anything yet. We'll set this up so that it does do something after we're done. Okay, so let me go back to the outliner. Let me go to my snake spline. Let me see, right now 0 is right here at the beginning. Perfect 0 spot. And then let's see where his end is. The farthest I want him to be able to go in here. Let's say right there, okay? Let's say at 44, this thing's at 44, that's the farthest I'm going to want him to go. Because any further, it's going to look kind of funny. Like, right now he's like just too straight of a snake. We're at 44. It looked like it was still kind of plausible that he could be in this position. Okay? So, back to our controller here. So, the highest I'm going to want this thing to go, whoops, is going to be 44 on the offset. So what I need to do is create a connection between this and this. Okay? So I need to connect these two things here. So I could do this a billion different ways. I'm going to show you a couple different ways that we can do this just for fun. So first I'm going to whip out my calculator. And if I take 30 and I divide it by 44, oops, sorry, 44 and divide it by 30, I get 1.4 repeating 6. Okay, so basically what that means is that in order for these two to match up, when I move this to 1, the other one needs to move to 1.4666. When I move it to 2, then the other one needs to move this times 2. Okay, so here's how I'm going to do this. Is I'm going to click on that spline. I'm just marqueing the neck area and it automatically grabs it. You could also just grab it from, obviously, the outliner. So I'm going to go to my offset. I'm going to go to Edit and say Expressions. Okay, in here I'm going to say Snake, IK, Spline.offset. And I can even put this into WordPad so it's easier to read. And I have to figure out how to change my font. There it is. It's better. Okay, so ikspline.offset is going to be equal to whatever the other thing was called. And that was called neckControl.snakeOffset. Okay, so neckControl.snakeOffset. And then a semicolon at the end. So I'm basically saying that the IK spline offset, the one that is on the IK spline that we actually use to move the snake around, is going to equal whatever value we have inside this snake offset here. Okay, remember right now it doesn't do anything, but it will. So I'm just going to copy. I'm going to paste in the expression editor and hit create. Now I get an error, snake ikspline.offset doesn't exist. So I've typed something wrong here. And in a way I'm glad that it happened, because that way it gives me a chance to troubleshoot it. Snake ikspline.offset, that's what it's called. Snake ikspline dot offset. I'm going to put this as a capital O and hit create. Nope, still nothing. Alright, so I'm going to go to edit here, say channel names, and say long. And this will show me the names of it. Offset. I was right. Oh, this is a lowercase k. It's hard to see because they look similar. Okay, so snake IK spline. So this k here is a lowercase k. Equals the neck control. Create. Okay, so now you'll see that this attribute turns purple. Now if I grab this and I go to my snake offset, okay, so this is what we want to control this thing moving along the path. I click on that snake offset and I middle drag, you'll see that now he's moving along. So this is actually tied to the other attribute, so it's actually doing something. But what we're going to see is that when he gets to 30, it just stops. He doesn't move any further. Okay? So what I need to do is I'm going to go back to that expression. So I just go to my expression editor, by expression name, and I don't need these other expressions in here. I can just delete expression 1 and 2. That was for something else. And I'm going to say multiply whatever that value is by 1.466666. And I'll throw a 7 at the end. Okay, so now whatever that value was on the controlling object, okay, whatever the value is here at this circle, now it's going to equal that times 1.4667. So now as I control this, here it is at 0, still in the 0 spot. As I click and drag with my middle mouse, you see him moving along. And he's going to go all the way to the end, and you'll see that he stops right at 30, and he stops right at about 40. Now it might be a little bit off, but it looks like, sorry, 44, but it's right on. So we did perfect math there. Okay, so that's number one way, and most of the time I go to expressions, because expressions are a great way to be able to do that. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the other way. So I'm just going to break the connection here. So I right click on it, break connection, voila, gone. And I'm going to go to edit, set driven key. That'll be the next one. Okay, so I'm on the snake IK spline, clicked on offset, edit, set driven key. And my driver, okay, what's my controlling object? This is my controlling object. So I'm going to load that as my driver. Driver is the controlling object. Say it to yourself while you're trying to go to sleep at night. Snake neck control, snake offset. This is going to control the snake IK spline offset. Okay, so I'm going to click on neck control, and this is at 0. I'm going to click on snake IK spline, and this is at 0. Make sure that these things are picked. Neck control, snake offset, snake IK spline offset. Key them. We're good. It set a key at 1. Okay, this is again a different kind of key than a time frame key. So now I'm going to go to neck control and set this to 30. Go to my snake IK spline, set this to 44. Hit key again, and there we go. Now it's all set up. That's all we have to do. So now when I grab the circle, I click on this and I middle drag. You'll see that 0 is still 0, and now 30 is still 44. Okay, so it creates a relationship. If I can go to my graph editor, right here. Now the cool thing about this compared to using the expression editor is that I actually get a graph. I can actually go in there and control how this thing is moving. So I can basically say I don't want to, like, you know, originally it's slowly increasing speed as it moves and then going there. I could have it go like this. Okay, but what I want to do on any set driven is make them linear. Okay, because anytime I do a keyframe, I want a keyframe, the actual keyframe, to be able to control it. So I always do this as a linear, unless I had a keyframe in the middle, and let's say it was down here. I wouldn't want this linear because I'm going to get this weird chug, this weird little stopping point that it kind of like hits. So then in that case I would make it spline, which makes a nice smooth transition. Okay, but everything else I'm just going to click on it, make it linear, and there we go. Alright, so now we're good. So now I can click on the circle again, And we have the exact same result that we had last time, except this time we have a graph that we could play with if we chose to. Okay. So now that was another way. So now let's go to another way to do this. Hypershade. Okay, now I'm not assigning a material to this, but what I am going to use is some nodes inside there. So I have the the snake IK spline selected. I'm going to shift click the circle. I'm going to come in here and graph them out. Okay, so I just click on this graph button. Any one of these will show me what I need to see. I think this one, nope. That one, this far left one, is the one I'm going to want. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to go into here. I'm going to look for the multiply divide, which is right there, and I click on it, and there it is. And if I click on the transform, you'll see that there it is, snake offset. So I'm going to middle drag my neck control onto the multiply and say input 1. And it's going to say, what do you want to connect? And I'm going to say, well, what I want to connect is snake offset to input 1 in the X. Okay, it doesn't matter if I use X, Y, or Z, or if I used all three of these, but I only need to use 1, so I'm just going to use 1. Okay, and then in here, I'm going to take this and put in that 1.46667 number, and it rounds it because it's inside here. And what this is going to do is it's going to do the math for us. Instead of us writing an expression, it's going to do the math inside this node. So it takes whatever value is here, multiplies it by whatever value is here, because that's the same column, and then the output will be the number we need. So now if I go to this IK, or this snake IK spline, and I middle drag the multiply divide on the snake IK spline, and say other, because it's not listed, I'm going to say I want the output X to go into offset. Okay, so now we should be all set. If I click on the circle, click on snake offset, middle drag, you'll see that now we have the exact same result, 44 here, when the circle here, come on, is set to 30. There we go. Okay, so there's 3 different ways to do it. I encourage you to play with all 3 ways. We will get into more ways as we go and different ways to do things. But those are the 3 popular ways to kind of rig some of these other items here. Okay, when we have something that's not a uniform one-to-one relationship. Okay, meaning that when this is 30, that the other one's not 30. Now I could have also, I'll show you one more little way I could have done this, is that I could have gone into my attribute, so modify edit attribute, set this to 44, that's as far as we want it to go. Click on the IK spline, I'll break the connection again, and then what I'm going to do is open up the connection editor. And on the right is going to be the snake IK spline, on the left is going to be the neck control. And I'm simply going to connect the snake offset to this offset. That's all I have to do. Click, click. Now they're connected. Okay, so now when I click here and I drag, you'll see that when this is 44, that's 44. Okay, so in the end, I want to just make sure that I can have a control that I can easily go to on this circle without having to dig around for stuff. Okay. And I can also grab this and obviously rotate where the head is looking. Now there's also some other controls on here too. There's a roll, which is rolling the entire shape of him. Let me turn this on. Let's see it. There's a twist, where if we look back here, we're not really getting a lot of movement, but up here we definitely are. Here he's actually twisting. And as I go further and further, you can actually see that his whole body is kind of twisting all the way down there. Okay, so we've connected one thing to it, but it wouldn't help to also have the roll and the twist on there as well. Okay, and this is where some of these, like roll, I don't know how far I want this to go. You know, I don't want to be going forever with this. So you have to be able to kind of play with some of these settings and understand the limits and understand, you know, where you want the character to be able to do in order for this stuff to kind of happen. Okay. So I'm going to add roll and I'm going to add twist to this as well. So I'm clicking the circle, add attribute, and this was snake roll. And this one I'll do 30 as well, and 0 is my default. Now I picked 30 just because it's a good value. Now actually I probably want to have this as a negative 30 and a positive 30. Okay, because what if he wants to twist the other way, right? Offset, we don't have a negative, it's 0, 0. But roll, we can go this way into the negatives, or we can go this way into the positives. So I'm going to edit my attribute on the other one and make sure I have a negative 30 as well. Okay. So I'm just going to go through and just do a set driven on these. Roll, expressions. I like to put all my expressions in one, so I'm just going to go, oops, I deleted the expression, that's why it's not there. I'm going to go snake, type it here so you can see it. Not snake, snake, ik spline dot roll equals mech control dot snake roll. And let's multiply that by, let's see, 15. Okay. I'm just going to copy paste, change roll here to twist, change roll here. If you're consistent with your names, it makes it much easier. Paste them in there, create snake twist. This should be a capital T right there. Create, wonderful. They both work, they're both purple. That's why I like doing it this way. You see how I can control these very quickly. Alright, so now if I grab the circle, I can roll him. And you'll see there's a limit. You can only go that far, all the way up to 30. And this should be plenty enough. If I click on here, that's actually at 450 degrees. So it should be more than enough rolling that he would need to do. Snake twist. Come on. There we go. Same thing, 450 degrees in the twist. Okay. So now I have all three of these things connected. So I don't need this snake IK spline anymore. It's pretty much done. I can't delete it, but I can hide it. So I'm just going to hit Control H. And that hides the IK spline. So I don't need to see it anymore. I don't need to see these joints anymore, so I'm going to go to Show here and go to Joints. Now, the reason I can't grab the joints, if I were to click on the joints and hit Control H, you'll see that all my controls are gone, as well as my eyes. Okay, so I have to go to Show here and turn joints off. All right, so now my joints are gone, and all I'm left with are these controls. All right, so this neck one I have to be careful with. I don't want to accidentally move this around. All right, so I'm going to grab my translates, right click and lock them. I'm going to grab my scales, my visibility, right click and lock that. Okay, so if I offset it, still moves. I can't move it physically. I can't scale it, but I can rotate it, which is the purpose of it, right? And then I'm going to do the same kind of thing for these. This here, there is a chance that I might want to rotate this. If I want one eye to go one way and one eye to go the other way for some odd reason, I have that ability. Okay, I don't think I want to scale it though. That's kind of a weird thing. But I would definitely want to be able to move it in here. So I can leave these alone. These here, no real reason to rotate it. Okay, actually let's go back to this guy and just turn the scale off. Let's lock the scale. Let's grab these guys and we'll lock the scale. And we'll lock the rotation of those. There we go. Okay. Alright, so now we can grab this. And then we can animate our little snake going along the path. Okay, now I have one extra thing that I want to add. It's a matter of making this look extra nice. If we look at the snake, and I'm just going to animate him real quick. Okay, so how long does it take to go along the path? Who knows? Let's say 100 or 200 frames. You can always adjust it. So I'm going to take my snake, and here, this is the cool part, is all I have to do is grab this, right click, key selected, oops, make sure I'm on frame 1, right click, key selected, go up to frame 200, pull that all the way up, right click, key selected, and it's done. Okay, I can still go into my graph editor and make sure this is, you know, nice and smooth. He eases in and eases out. Rewind it, hit play, and you'll see that he's moving along his path. Now, one of the things that really bothers me is the fact that he's moving perfectly along his path. You'll see that there's no wiggle to him. Okay, where his head is right now, his tail and body is going to be there in a second. Okay, and it's kind of rough right there at the end, this little turn here. So I can always tweak this curve a bit. And I can even, so he's not intersecting himself, go to the end. I can play with these points and get him basically to kind of like rest on his own skin here. It'll take a second just to kind of move that point in alignment. There we go, that's good. Okay, and I can always grab this and I can animate this kind of after the fact. All right. I like the way it looks there. I'm just going to set some more keyframes on this. Let's key that. Go back a little bit like that. Set a key back here. And you can see he's going to come around and kind of smack into himself. So I'm going to have to pull this up. I'm just going to give him a little rotation. Make sure he doesn't freak out. There we go. Nice smooth transition in there. Okay, so that's, you know, part of it, but the other part is this curve. I want this curve to also kind of move around. I can tweak his head all day long, but I think that adding some animation to the curve will really help. Now there's an easy way to do it, which is using under nonlinear, Create Deformer as nonlinear, using that wave. Okay, so I'm just going to go in here and take my amplitude up. And with my amplitude up, you'll see that the curve is actually like wavy now. It's like up in the air. So when I hit play, you'll see the snake's going to be doing some funky stuff. Let me turn his wireframe off. It's kind of like freaking out a little bit. Okay, so a couple more adjustments to this. I'm going to rotate it so it's face down like that. So rotate it -90. Okay, so here it is without amplitude, 0. Here it is with amplitude. Oops, that's too much. 0.04, maybe 0.02, we'll see. I'm going to take my wavelength down to 0.1. And by having a tight wavelength, I get a lot of these. That's what I want. And then this offset, as I middle drag this offset, I would see some animation. There we go. I have to move it in like super small increments. Okay. So what I'm going to do is take this offset and set that to be on our circle controller as well. Okay, so I'm going to go to Modify, Add Attribute, Wave Offset. I think 3 is going to be the highest I'm going to want to go. I don't even think I'm going to go that high. Maybe just 1. Oops. 0, 1, 0. We'll put it to 10. 0, 10, 0. Okay, because I'm going to use an expression for this. And grab the wave, go to the offset, edit expressions. Again, great thing about expressions. I have this already kind of saved. So all I have to do is just replace a couple names. Wave1.offset is equal to the net control wave offset. And I'm going to multiply this by 0.01. I can change that later if I need to. So create, and there it is. It works perfectly. All right, so now I have this. Then I'm just going to rewind, set a keyframe at the beginning, go to about the end at 190, and set a keyframe to 10. Okay, so now as I rewind it and hit play, you'll see that the curve is kind of moving very gradually. All right, I'm going to kick it up a bit. Go back to that expression. Oops. And I want to keep this in the same one as the other one, so I'm just going to delete, go to the previous expression, and multiply it times 0.1. That's going to be too drastic. 0.05. There we go. Okay, so I hit edit and then play. And now you can really see this curve kind of morphing, which gives the snake a little bit more movement. So you can see that he's not moving perfectly in sync with everything else. And I think I also want to rotate this some, like that. There we go. I can also add some drop off to this. That way in certain areas it's a little bit stronger, maybe add a little bit more amplitude. Alright, so let's hit play again. So over here we're not getting a whole lot of movement. But once he gets to that middle area, he's really kind of wiggling his tail around also. And that just gives him a little bit more life. It's a little bit more generic, not generic, a little bit more animated than we had before, okay? And if I did go something like this, one of the issues I'm going to have is that my snake, because of how this is set up, he's going to kind of roll. So this is where that snake roll attribute could come in handy, where we could kind of keyframe this thing as we're moving along. And we see him kind of go off track. Whoa, look at that, a barrel roll. Then we can fix that, okay? I think that looks nice like that. And I could, of course, come back and tweak the path too. Cool. All right. And just for fun, bonus feature. If I create a polygon plane, I grab some of these points and just kind of pull them up like that. There is a feature inside here where I could click on this magnet with the bracket around it. Go to my Create Curve tool. And I'm just creating a bunch of points. There we go. Go back to perspective. And you'll see that, let me click that magnet off, that it created this curve on the surface. So now it's like actually like a 3D curve. So if I originally wanted my snake to kind of follow this path along here, I could do that. Okay. Now here's another benefit of expressions over any of the other setups, set driven or connection editor, or any of these things. Go back to my outliner. Let's pretend I wanted this curve here to be a different one. Okay, so if I delete the curve, I essentially disabled this IK spline. So now that doesn't work anymore. Okay, so everything that we set up is just dead. Doesn't work. But here's the but part. If I were to go through my IK spline now, let me turn my joints back on so I can see them. Click the same joint, back joint, the one right before the neck, and then I use my new curve. Okay, he's not going to move. I hit play, nothing happens. But if I take my IK spline and I rename it to the exact same thing, which was Snake IK spline, I go into the offset, go to my expressions. All right, copy my expressions and paste them in. Oops. There we go. Snake offset, snake roll, snake twist. You'll see all these are connected. Now I rewind and I hit play, and you'll see that the snake is now moving along my new path without having to do any extra set driven, any extra anything. It just works because I have the expressions, the names are the same, so everything swims along swimmingly. Now he is kind of cutting through this because of how it's set up, so I just have to take this plane and push it down. And push it up a little bit more. There we go. Okay, now there is going to be a difference between how many points I clicked in here. So this one, if I look at the IK spline, actually if I just look at the curve, this one has 72 points, okay? And that's where that 44 number came from, is there were 44 points in the past one. So if I just go into my expression for the IK spline, edit expression, and the snake offset, times, so we set it to 44 before, I'll just say it's times 1.75. Just a rough number, you know, if it gets close enough, it gets close enough. Doesn't have to be accurate, you know, to the letter. And you see you actually went a little bit too far. So 1.65. You see how easy this is, you just kind of plug in a number and, you know, see where it's at. And let's say I didn't want to go through the hassle of, you know, what number is it exactly. I could just grab this and just only key this to 42. So I can just go to my edit attribute, snake offset. Highest I want it to go is 42. There we go. So now it's not going to go any further than that. Oops. I still have keyframes on it. I have to make sure my keyframe is set to 42. Okay, so that's as far as he's going to go now. So it's good. We're all set up. I can still come back. I can still tweak the curve, move points around, whatever. That still works. My wave is no longer activated because obviously we deleted the curve. The wave was affecting the curve, so I would still have to go back and recreate that. Wave amplitude, I think we had it to 0.05. Wavelength, the point is 1. The offset was connected, so let me just grab that little expression and go to my other expressions and just paste this in at the end. There we go. And now we're animated again. Rotate this 90 degrees like that. Okay, now because of the nature of what this is doing, I may have to be a little bit more subtler because he's actually interacting with this bumpy surface. Okay, so areas like this, he's like sticking through. Well, okay, I may have to go and grab this edge. I may push that edge so he's not going through. And then right here, again, he's probably sticking through. Again, go through and maybe grab this edge and scoot it down or whatever. Okay, it doesn't have a lot of divisions. You typically want a lot of divisions. And then if it was a surface like this, I have to make sure that I go through and do our rolling to get the snake to be aligned perfectly. Okay, for this, you don't have to go and create this kind of surface. You can just keep everything flat. I'm just scaling this down flat, so now he's flat, and he doesn't have to worry about doing that crazy movement that he was doing. There we go. Okay, and I am going to give him a little bit of rotation at the beginning, I think. Do that. And let me just check my graph editor and take a look and see where that rotate is. There we go. Okay. And I'll give his eyes a little bit of movement too, just so he's not static eyes. And if you look at these, the arrows, let me go to a more drastic area. You'll see here I want to move these arrows basically directly forward, but it's not going to move directly forward. If I double click my move tool and I change this to object, that changes this so that they are pointing directly straight. Okay. And remember, I also have this big guy who I'd want to use for that directly straight kind of movement where they're moving together. Okay. So this is just in the X. I'm just going to set a key. Go up a little bit. Not that much. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go up to 100. We'll set another key. Then we just kind of come in the middle of this. I'm just kind of setting some random keys to get the snake to kind of look around, kind of like darting his eyes. And you mute this offset for a second. Mute selected. There we go. And I'm just going to copy this whole animation and just kind of paste it throughout. There it is. There it is. There it is. Okay. I'm just pasting it. That way I don't have to worry about kind of going through and doing all that other stuff. I'm also going to keyframe or mute this offset here. Now I can look at it and see, what are his eyes doing? So I'm happy with the way that looks. I'm gonna right click and unlock or unmute those. There we go. Alright, so now it's just a matter of doing the pretty. Creating a plane for the ground. Making sure that he's not intersecting it. Right now he is. I'm just going to put him on his bottom. Adding some lights. This guy is already textured, so you shouldn't have to worry about the texturing of it. You have to add some lights in here. He has a Mia shaded, so you will have to use Mental Ray to render this out. It does look great when you do motion blur, and because he is skinned, you have to use full. And I ended up on the one I am currently rendering, lowering this motion blur by really low, like 0.01 or something like that, and then changing this to keyframe end of frame. Alright, otherwise you get blurriness on both sides, and you don't want that. Okay, but it's really going to depend on how much movement you have in your snake as to what he's doing. Now I also, let me just save this as. I'm going to open up the one that I have here, which is Snake 2, beautifully descriptively named. And there's my snake on his little path, wiggling around. Same kind of setup. This is before I did any rigging to it. I just wanted to get in there and animate him. Okay, he does the same kind of thing. I created 2 cameras here. Let me go look through perspective 1. Perspective 1 is for frames 1 through 50. So that's essentially what camera 1 is getting right there. Okay. And then camera 2 is getting 51 through 150. And I could create, obviously, a camera 3 as well. Okay. And then this is what the first camera is looking like. Oops. Alright, so that's what he's looking like there. There's the texture for the eyes, the texture for the skin. He is linear right now, so I have to color correct him afterwards. I also set up an ambient occlusion pass, so there it is. So I can tweak that as well later. And the way I set up the cameras to render is I use render layers. So I made one layer here. I just left it as layer 1, didn't matter. I could have called it camera 1, camera 2. But essentially I grabbed everything in my scene using the outliner. Went to new render layer. And I made 2 of them. And in my render settings, I changed my file name prefix. I just right clicked and said insert camera name. Okay, that way when it renders, it's going to render out whatever the camera is called. And then down here where it says frame range, let's say I want to render this camera from 150 to 200. So I'm going to right click on here and say create layer override. Right click on end frame, create layer override, and say 150 to 200 is that one. And then which camera, I'm going to right click and create layer override and pick the camera I want to render at that time. Then I go to my other one and do the same thing. Create layer override. Let's say this is 200 to 250. Oops. Make sure I do the override. And then on the renderable camera, I right click and do a create layer override and pick the other camera. Okay. So what this is going to do is as I switch between these, you can see I have different frame ranges and different cameras being rendered. Okay. The other way to do that is to render out one camera, let it finish, and then do the other camera. But now with this, I don't have to worry about, oh, I have to be there when it stops rendering the first camera so I can start the second camera. I don't need to worry about that. Delete, select the layers. Okay. So now as this thing's going, I can just kind of let it go and work on other stuff and not have to worry about anything weird going on. Look at that beautiful movement of the snake's skin. You really get a sense that, he's kind of moving around. His muscles are moving. It's not simply just the snake moving along his path. His muscles seem to be moving and kind of wiggling in that path. So it's very cool. And I did do an HDR out here. You don't have to do that. I did some area lights. You don't have to do that. Just make sure it looks good. I do want you to use the same texture, so use the same texture. I do want these to be quite a few seconds. This is 200 seconds at 30 frames a second. You can pull out your calculator, 200 divided by 30, and I'm looking at about a 6-second animation. So anywhere between 5 and 10 seconds of animation is good. When you turn this one in, you're going to be turning in not only your movie, you just have to do the motion blur movie, but you'll also be turning in your file. So I'm actually going to go through and look at your file and go through and make sure I can tweak all the stuff that we talked about on this fully rigged one. Okay, so I should be able to go through and say, okay, well, let me see, this here, what does it do? Okay, it does that. What does this do? Moves the eyes. Good. What do these things do? Moves the individual eye. Good. If I click on the circle here, I should be able to do the roll. I should be able to do the offset here. I should be able to do the wave offset. I should be able to do the snake offset. Okay. We can also hide this thing and hide. We don't need to hide that. I think I'm going to put on a layer though. Snake path. I just don't want anyone messing with it. I'm just going to make it a reference. That way you can't select it. Okay, make sure the joints are turned off. Make sure in your outliner everything's nice and clean and labeled. Ground. Snake joints, okay? Snake path curve. Alright, cool. Nice and organized. That's what we want. Okay. So now I'll save this one as Sarcona Snake Rigged Final. Okay, so now that's the final one. He's animated, he's rigged, he's ready to go. Render it out, put it into a QuickTime movie, turn in the QuickTime movie with motion blur and your snake file, and then that's the assignment. All right, so we'll continue from there.